Welcome to episode 6 of Silver Linings. Today I'm interviewing Daniel Cantor Yalowitz, who has written a book, Reflections on the Nature of Friendship. We are here at the Stone Soup Cafe, which is located at the Unitarian Universalist Church here in Greenfield. I'd like to start off, Daniel, by asking you about your early life, your early days. You were born and raised in New York City into a Jewish family, had 2 younger brothers, and your parents were social workers. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing and your friendships within your community.
Well, it's a long story, as it would be for anyone, I guess, looking back. I was born in Brooklyn, and my family moved. I was the oldest of 3 brothers. We moved when I was 5 to Manhattan, to a new development in the shadow of the Empire State Building. So that's where I grew up. And that's where I went to public school all the way through, from K through 12, with 1 year at a Quaker school in Manhattan. And I think one of the things that saved me is that my parents had the vision to buy a small country home in Westchester, where we used to escape for weekends and for the entire summer. And starting at age 8, I started going to what's called sleepaway camp every summer. And what I recall especially was the importance of having a close-knit family, a quote, functional family, and also a lot of friends from New York City, from the little town of Goldensbridge in New York, in Westchester, and also Camp Thoreau in particular, which was in Wallkill, New York, near New Paltz. And just having friendship clusters in each area and being able to move with some fluency and some fluidity among those different communities. And that made New York much more tolerable. We lived in a cooperative, a series of 21-story apartment buildings. So there were about 12,000 people in a 4-block square space. So, literally stacked on top of each other. And so it was a good balance between city and rural, and going back and forth, and learning to have some ease of movement between those different organizations and communities.
Did you have a lot of diversity in growing up as a New Yorker, growing up in the New York City area? I mean, just for reference, I was born and raised in Turners Falls, Mass. In the mid-50s, 60s. We lived in the housing project, Hillcrest Homes, a development that was built for the veterans of World War II and their families.
Okay.
So that's where I was born and raised, and walked out my front door at any given time in my childhood, and there was either Mimi, Matey, Net, Shay, just a group of friends. But there was no diversity among that town at that time. So
Right.
in that way, I had friends, and we were all different in our personalities, but there wasn't a lot of diversity in cultures necessarily, So did you find it a very enriching experience having friends of different backgrounds and nationalities of sorts?
Well, it's a great question. And of course, when we think about diversity and so on, one of the first things we think about is skin color and also culture and so on. And New York, considered, even though the term is no longer in vogue, a kind of a melting pot, right? And it's really curious, because that was certainly the background that I grew up in. But when I think about PS 33, where I went to elementary school through 5th grade, my class was probably about 75 to 80% white. So, and of that, probably close to 50% Jewish. So does that make it diverse? It really depends on how you define the term. But I will say that there were opportunities, obviously, to mingle and mix with folks different than myself, whether we're talking about socioeconomic class or race or culture, ethnicity, language. There was some of that, but not as much as one might think when I think about the immediacy of that community. But I do recall going to, we called it intermediate school at the time, junior high school. And the junior high school that I went to, which was called IS 70, Intermediate School number 70, New York City, they have numbers instead of names. That was about 90% white. And the high school right across the street, Charles Evans Hughes High School, was about 95% black. And there were significant racial issues during the 2 years that I was there. And that was really the first opportunity I had to come face to face with conflict between and among people who represented different cultures, ways of life, and so on. But for the most part, I recall that it was mostly harmonious and a reasonably easy place to grow up in at that time. But again, the opportunity to mix and mingle with people different than myself and explore different cultures, starting to learn Spanish in third grade. And that's also when I came into my musical life, picking up clarinet in third grade, and just getting to live with and flush that out 24/7. A great opportunity for growth for me. Yeah.
Now, after your young education years, your middle school and then high school, what made you make your decision as a young adult to study psychology or go into the field that you became very successful in teaching also in academia?
Yep.
So what led you to that? I know your parents were social workers. Did that have some influence in that?
Absolutely. I mean, my mom was a working psychotherapist in private practice, and my dad was more of a kind of administrator. But they both got their MSWs from Columbia. And so that was the kind of home context that I grew up in. And sitting around the dinner table, which was a nightly experience, 6 p.m., home for dinner.
Same with us.
It was not an unusual occurrence at that time. And there was, strong insistence that be a family time before TV and homework and whatever.
Absolutely.
Right? So you share that.
Yes, very similar.
Yeah, and so we would bring our experiences of the day, whether school, outside, whatever we were doing. And, there were two therapists at the table with us for the three of us. And so we became used to having, our thoughts dissected and analyzed and whatnot. But it also brought a certain closeness because my mother really believed in the power of asking questions. And the sleepaway camp experience and all the communities that my parents belonged to, they were very politically active, socially active people. And so to me, when I finally decided, yes, time to go to college, there was an expectation there, to be clear. But I knew that I couldn't be in New York City. I knew I had to get out. And I thought, well, let's try.
Spread your wings, so to
Spread my
speak,
wings.
yeah.
And
Find your own way.
Right. And so Boston became, my new hometown and Tufts University. And I double majored in child development and community mental health, what's now called human services, with a minor in music. And so the early childhood development and early childhood education. And I was wrestling with, where do I go with this? Do I go the route of education and special education, which I was deeply interested in, or into social work and psychology, which my parents represented. And I decided that I wanted to carve my own path. And so I ended up getting a master's degree in special education and a doctorate in education, interestingly enough, in developmental and intercultural psychology. So I straddled both. I blended both. And even now, having finished out my academic career, I am doing some individual psychotherapy now and some coaching and a lot of training and so on that keeps me kind of in both areas at the same time.
Kept you in the loop, so to speak.
Sure.
Yeah. Without being there full time, because that's
Right.
yeah.
I really like the intersections
Yes.
of both of those.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, when you made that decision to write this book, that was in 2020, was it?
I completed it. It was published in early 2021.
2021. So that the impact of the epidemic or the pandemic, I mean, was that the at the forefront of why you started writing this? And
Interesting story. Yeah.
Okay.
I had traveled to the People's Republic of China in late fall, November of 2019, where I was holding a 2-week course for academics across the country of China in intercultural communication. And it was even though people were from all over the country, and I was the one white, Westerner in a group of about, I think we had about 85 students. I worked a lot with community building and such, some of the focal points, if you will, of intercultural communication. And found out after I came home toward the end of December of 2019, I found out not too much later that a couple of my students had passed away from this unknown disease at the time, which we now know was COVID-19. And I really began to think about the power, this was just as COVID was setting in the very early months, the power of connection and the differences that it makes in one's life. And most of the energy early on in COVID was going toward the medical and the physical issues, of course, because people were dying and we had no
yes, you
knowledge.
had to find the cure, or
Right.
whatever that was.
And my interest went in a different direction because what I was seeing is that people were self-isolating, shutting themselves in, being shut in, schools closing. And I really began to think about the mental health issues involved in COVID and what it looked and felt like to see people not being able to see each other, and that lots of the social venues were being closed, right from bars to clubs to health centers, movies. And how do people operate when those spaces are not available? And so that got me thinking about the power of friendship. And I started talking with friends in different countries as COVID progressed, and really began to get a sense of a book on friendship would be really useful at this time, because a lot of the social skills were being tested and lost without the access people had to each other. So the book is really a testimonial, if you will, to the power of friendship and connection, particularly at a time of deep stress, not just in our country, but globally.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
The entire planet was experiencing the same thing at the same time, which is very rare on our planet, to have
right.
the entire populace of the planet Earth. So, so you had obviously then the time in which to do this because there was nothing open. You were not, everybody had that moment of time to decide what was important to them and to do something maybe beneficial to others. And that's what you chose to do, which is great. And now you write this, the human condition is inherently social. It's a journey into knowing ourselves and to getting to know others. But it seems, at times in our lives that friendships just happen out of the blue. And they're very kind of unexpected, but they do, just kind of unexpectedly happen. But as you write, it takes conscious work to create a meaningful friendship. So discuss through your personal life friendships and along with your academic teachings and what you might have discovered anew while researching this book, perhaps a common thread that occurs in successful friendships.
Excellent question. Well, I do believe, and we have numerous daily experiences, that human beings are social beings. That doesn't mean that friendship is at the top of everyone's list. But it does mean that we are built with the capacity to relate to other people. And where that goes is the stuff of everyone's own self-narrative. But we can't exist in this world on our own in a bubble. And I say that with respect to those who do have a preference towards self-isolation or insularity. And at the same time, if you think about how long it takes to raise an infant, a baby, to a child through childhood and adolescence, I believe that human beings are the species that take the longest to become autonomous, self-dependent individuals. And so that gives us a lot of time to practice the social skills. Interestingly enough, most of those are not taught or learned at school. So we kind of come into the world and we stumble and we bumble, and we have adults around us for the most part, many of us, not all, who are there both to help correct inappropriate activities and so on, and reinforce the positives. And so those become, in a sense, role models, or at least potential role models. And the rest, we just practice. We work at it. And when you said social work, it's a spin on social work. It's social work to develop the kind of emotional and social intelligence that allows others to reach out to us and for us to reach back. It's a kind of dialogic loop, right, in a way.
It's like a hit and miss kind of scenario where sometimes you're going to hit and it's going to work, and other times you're going to miss and it's not going to, you're going to misfire and something's not going to work out. But right, there's always that opportunity to rectify something or reestablish a yes, friendship if things aren't always, as they hope to be or you hope them to be in life. And
true enough. And it's been said that to have a friend, you have to be a friend.
That's very common saying.
and so we make mistakes. No one hits it off with absolutely everybody. The hope is that we can learn from the mistakes that we make or are made in the service of friendship, and we take those learnings as a way of a pathway towards self-awareness. And as we become more and more self-aware, we're able to share that awareness and that sensitivity, not only about ourselves, but for other people. And that's how we develop empathy and care and concern. And of course, friendship is about a lot of things.
Sure.
It's not just about the depth of connection.
Right. Acceptance of yourself and everything that comes, the baggage that comes with anybody else too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if you're not willing to do that, well then, so be it. But at least you've tried, make the effort and try.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's all about opportunity. And it's almost like a dance, and you're trying to find partners who can communicate with you in the same language and in the same ways. And the book is really a testimonial to that, where it's reflecting on various aspects of friendship as a unique form of human relationship. Not all human relationships are friends. Friends are a subset of a much bigger circle. But there are things that make friendships quite unique and different from, say, collegial relationships or family relationships or even love relationships, in that friends are relationships of choice.
But I think on some level, there's trust in all relationships. If you have trust in somebody and if they can trust you, whatever kind of relationship you're involved in, I think that is a real solid, basic thing for any relationship in the human species, to trust somebody, to be able to feel like you can confidently speak to them and trust in how they are going to take what you're giving them, basically.
Well, that's absolutely right. And the other thing about trust is that it's earned. It's not something that's just bestowed or given.
Right.
And friendship being a peer relationship, the hope is that and I believe that the best friendships are shared, where it's a two-way relationship as opposed to, say, therapist and client or teacher and student, because there's a mutuality. And it's a choice to keep coming back and to keep developing depth. And we do that in many ways, whether it's activity-based or talking-based or whatever else. And we have friends who we do different things with. But I think one of the bases that you pointed to is that there's a fundamental sense of trust that both people can depend on.
Feel confident about.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just referencing here on page 56 and 57 of your book, you talked about creating a course that was titled Longing and Belonging.
Oh, yeah.
And I would like to hear about this coursework and its results from the students that were involved.
Well,
how that
yeah,
all
that was
panned
a
out.
pretty unique experience. I was a new dean at Middlesex Community College in Eastern Massachusetts, and a few of us were looking to do something for the many students at this particular community college who did not have a declared major. Because the way majors were designed, it brought a cohort of students together into common courses, and that gave them opportunities to
Right.
share and connect. But if you were undeclared, you
Right.
didn't really have that. And so my vision was to develop a liberal arts course, because these were liberal arts students, that would bring these people together into a setting, and we decided to make it a full intensive weekend course, which had aspects of all the the arts and humanities, social sciences, physical sciences, and so on. And I think I came up with a rather catchy term, which is America longing and belonging. Because that's one thing that many of our students who were first generation college students were looking to belong to something, and they were longing to belong. And so this gave them a sense of identity. They were with peers who were in the same place as they were academically, looking for something to kind of connect with. And we ran that course for a few years, and what we found was that there was less attrition from that group as that course became enhanced. Fewer of the students dropped out, and so it had a real benefit to them because it kept them thinking that there was hope, that there was connection, that there was community there for them, and less of a sense of isolation. That was one of the major findings in the research we did about those courses and the students in those courses.
And they went on to graduate, and I mean, to really,
Well, that's
it bolstered them through, I think. some-
absolutely, and that's
yeah.
one of the metrics I think in any school of higher education is what's your graduation rate, and this school
Right,
in
there's
particular.
no guarantee that when you go, that's the, not fallacy, but that's always the thought that's in the back of your mind that lingers. You're spending this time, this money, this effort to achieve this, diploma, and hopefully it will translate into, a successful life after, your college career. But there's always never a guarantee. But if you have people around you that are supportive, that really makes a big difference. At least you've accomplished that, regardless of what happens after the cap goes flying into the air. At least you've had this group of people that you've managed through this time with, and
Right.
perhaps formed friendships, and at least there's a success in that.
Yes, and that's, I think in a certain way, that's what we're yearning for. I mean, there's kind of an existentialist.
It's not all about the money and the bottom line in life.
No, I
to
mean,
learn that.
sadly, I think that has shifted.
I think so.
Right, but at that point, and this is going back a number of years to the early 2000s, in a school with kind of a strong liberal arts component as well as a professional component, the idea was to really unite and connect people, even if it's talking about our differences and exploring them. Hopefully we're doing that in a safe context, a safe container.
Right, yes, yeah. And they can learn from it. And then hopefully it goes on with them. That's our only hope.
Right. Well, and again.
Well, even I would suggest starting that kind of coursework at the elementary school level. I mean, really, because I think the younger you start, to get children to engage in that kind of thinking, that we're all in this together, looking at the big picture of life on this planet, and it's not all about me and my wants and needs and desires. How can I help maybe somebody else, and so I
Well,
say that kind of coursework, might be beneficial at a young stage and age. And I know through, parenting and all that, that's an important aspect of learning, but,
Some of the research that I've read talks about things like emotional intelligence and social intelligence by the work of Howard Gardner and Harvard's Project Zero, that those are two of the harbingers, if you will, of future success, is the ability to know and understand oneself and the ability to read the cues and clues of other people in the context of whatever community or work one is doing. And I think you're absolutely right. The sooner we start that kind of skill building, the more hope, the greater hope there is for success, however it is that we define that.
right, and to carry on, yes, to carry it through, right? Your book, there are so many nice moments I found through reading it. It's just so well written, and the poetry that you place into the context and statements such as, a friend is one who walks in when the rest of the world walks out, by Walter Winchell. He was very profound, I thought.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
but throughout your book, that led me to reflect on my life friendships during joyful and difficult times. You clearly made the intentional effort to allow the reader to take our time and be thoughtful in connecting and understanding your writing, which I just really appreciate. I think it's a nice paced book with great references, and all your research comes out very clearly, and it just is really wonderful read for me.
Thanks.
I personally enjoy the slow reading aspect of it, where I highlight and I make written notations and I underline the context of the book. And during one interview, Carol Burnett once responded that people won't necessarily remember what you said or what you do, but they will remember how you made them feel. And I was wondering, what kind of feedback have you received from this book that you've written on the friendship?
Well, first,
Aspects of
thanks
it.
for your thanks for your kind words.
The book just makes me feel good. I was out in the sunshine reading it Tuesday when we had the sunshine, and just along with the sun in the sky and the blue sky and just reading it, it made me feel really good. And I think that's a really good way to explain what it's meant to me.
Well, thank you. And I think the word reflections that's in the title is a very deliberate choice, because it's not just for me to reflect, it's for all of us to reflect on the nature of friendship, title of the book. And the way you're thinking about it is the way I had intended. And there is a dialogic element in the book where I raise questions, I offer activities and exercises. And then, of course, the inclusion of poetry and prose and so on, whether it's from films or other books or whatever, are attempts to hook the reader in even more deeply because they see actual happenstance. And I follow the Wizard of Oz quite deeply in the book.
I was going to bring that up. Yes.
Yeah. And that's conscious because I think it's a mythopoetic kind of a story. And most U.S.ers, if I can say it that way, have had some direct experience with it, whether it's the books or the movie or the follow-ups, The Wiz, and
Right.
all of that.
Or the recently, Wicked.
Yes, the new
Wicked, which
film
is
that just came
phenomenally
out.
successful.
And we haven't seen the last of it, I'm
No,
sure.
I know it's going to have a second part. Yes.
Right. And so I think sometimes we gain further clarity by seeing things around us, and then that can be the hook to looking at things inside us.
Yes.
And so that's why I was so liberal in my use, if you will, of quotations and things that I have found in the world of literature and poetry and music and elsewhere. it's a way of deepening the discussion and the discernment. And I think it's a book that's probably best read in small, a few pages at a time. And that's your slow movement.
I don't feel rushed about it because I like to think about it, and I even talk out loud to myself about it, and just reminiscing and remembering things, that it's brought to my mind, brought to the forefront of my mind and thoughts.
I did have a very lovely recent experience in January. I was asked to teach the book in a 3-class session at the Northampton Senior Center.
I was going to ask, maybe you could have your own little series,
Well, the truth is I love to do that, and I'm looking at ways to continue the dialogue in different contexts, whether it's a one-off about the book itself, or what I really would love is longer-term opportunities to sit with a group of young people or adults or elders or whomever and really walk through the book as opposed to talk about it.
Yes.
And things came up. I won't say it was therapy, but it was very therapeutic for the 17 adults who were in that class. And the feedback on that was, we want more. And I think that speaks to the need in life that we, especially as we change and we age, we want the continuity of friendship. We want the security. We want the support. We want to offer it. It makes life living at a different level, not just for ourselves. And that's a really important learning, I think, for people to come across.
Right. Like in the reference to The Wizard of Oz, it made me think about how, if you're walking that yellow brick road alone and you come through challenges and you're on your own, slugging it through, well, that's kind of hard. But what came of Dorothy and the Scarecrow, Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion, is that they all had something that they were in search of, or they wanted, or a need, or a goal, or a desire. And together, forming their friendship to guide each other down that yellow brick road to find what they were looking for together in a way, kind of shows what life, we're all kind of like on that yellow brick road. Once we are born, that's where we are. And whatever challenges we come to, or any joys that we come to, it seems so much better when we have the encouragement and support of those around us, whether it be family or the friendships that we have, or somebody just leaning over and can kind of sense that maybe somebody is a little down in the mouth, or down or out of sorts, and just leaning in and just looking at them and saying, how you doing, and that there's friendship, and then there's being friendly, and in the course of being friendly, friendships can, evolve, and they may be on the very moderate surface level, but they can be like Dorothy and them, where they actually, in a way, save each other from themselves and the peril that's out there on that yellow brick road. But so that part of it made me really think about, friendships and how, when we're needing something, those friends really can come through in those moments and in our lives. So,
well, if I can, early on in the book, I introduce a kind of a metaphor, and it's visual, and I usually bring this with me to the programs that I do, a very large rubber band. And I don't know if you recall that, but that to me is a very powerful metaphor, because friendships expand, they contract, they shift, and so on. But the strongest friendships that each of us have are sustainable because they can move freely within that without the rubber band snapping. Right. And so we learn to build different skills, to use the intelligences that I talked about, emotional and social intelligence. And people can develop confidence in being with each other. And that's the trust piece that you talked about earlier. And so that rubber band analogy is also real from the other end, in that not all friendships are friendships for life. And that's so sometimes the rubber band snaps.
Intermittent, yeah.
Yep. And that doesn't mean that the friendship had no value.
Correct.
It may have had very deep value for a certain period of time
in your life, right.
And I do give 3 different case studies in the book, as you probably came across, of myself befriending and being friended by three different individuals and how I negotiated the challenges and so on. And I'm working now with, and I may have explained this to you when we met a week or so ago to plan this session, the continuum that friends share together between vulnerability and resiliency, and the importance of friendship really being inclusive of both of those. And in fact, they're connected because when we trust someone, we have the option to feel vulnerable with them. Mm-hmm. And in that shared vulnerability, we become more resilient. And so it's kind of an ongoing feedback loop. And so I think about the strong and the lifelong friendships that I have allow and embrace both of us being able to be vulnerable with each other because the trust is there, and also sharing our strength and our resilience with one another. And what that does is it brings out the best in each person, even when they're struggling.
Now, I'm sure you've traveled far and wide throughout your life with any opportunities that you may have had through academics or whatever. Do you find your friendships with people from other parts of the world basically the same as what you found in your growing up here in America or as a teacher? Or are there differences? I know when I was interviewing Father Stan Aksamit, he has traveled, and he said, you know what I found? People are basically the same everywhere in that they all want and are searching for kindness, hope, friendship, that basic kind of, thing to happen in their lives, to occur in their lives. It's, they're not trying to backstab you necessarily. And maybe the country, he was in Russia, and he said they were very friendly. And I kind of said, are you sure about that? I was there. I know they were friendly too. But, we had this not being there. I was curious as to that kind of comment. And what have you experienced with people from different parts of the planet?
Yeah, lots of thoughts on that, Susan. And first of all, I want to, before I reach out, because I've had the gift of opportunity now at this point in my life to have traveled to and through 94 different countries. But before
That's amazing.
It's been a life journey. But before I go there, I want to kind of bring the context as local as possible and note that we are sitting having this talk at Stone Soup Cafe in Greenfield. Yes. And I work here as a regular volunteer, chefing in the kitchen. I'm also vice president of the board of directors. And one of the things that stands out to me personally is that each Saturday when I'm here for a 5 or 6 hour shift, volunteering or at board meetings or with committees or out in the community, I get an opportunity that I wouldn't get otherwise because I'm working with people on a regular basis who I just wouldn't have contact with. And so that deepens my appreciation for difference and also for common ground. And so, in a sense, and not to make this a clinical point, but Stone Soup is a living, evolving case study of people learning how to get along with each other, working through the difficulties, of which there are many, right. and learning the language, whether it's nonviolent communication or whatever other skill sets we can bring to become our highest selves. And those are the tenets that we live with. So the larger part of the question about travel and making friendships, again, in the book, the hardest chapter for me to write was a friendship I developed with a younger, a woman half my age from Afghanistan. And the challenge is there because the cultures don't line up.
No, right.
And I was a dean of an institution at that point, and she was a master's degree student in it. And so there was something called a power asymmetry. In other words, we were not aligned as peers on any level except human beings. And so it was a constant challenge to find our humanity to share with each other. And what amazed each of us, which is where that chapter goes, is how deep that was. and how hard we
Over
had to
time,
work to
yeah,
find
over time.
the commonalities. But when we found them, that it was a very profound experience. And so I find no matter where I travel and doing my work or just having my pleasure in meeting new people, that I look to see both what makes us unique and where there is connection. And I want to use the uniqueness as a strength to learn. My favorite question that I use is just a 3-word question. Is there more? Mm-hmm. And trying to learn, tell me more. Mm-hmm. Let me understand, let me engage. And also at the same time, let me drop my assumptions.
True.
And
Right.
traveling does that like little else.
Something about somebody from another part of the planet, another
Yes.
country. It made me think in reading your book about friendships and the freedom to have friendships.
Right.
And I can only imagine if you were living in a country such as North Korea, the aspect of friendship may be a totally foreign concept. I mean, I don't know, we can only imagine what life is like. But as far as a friendship, I don't know how that is experienced in some parts of our planet, because there is not the freedom to be free, to be friendly, and to have friends.
There are
And
rules
so-
that different countries and cultures impose on their members. We have relative fluidity and fluency here, although
Thus far.
we haven't always.
I know. Yeah.
If you even
right.
think about the laws of miscegenation,
Right.
went up right until the early 1960s about intermarriage between races.
That's right.
But we tend to have fewer rules, although families can impose their own rules.
That's
but other
correct.
cultures are much clearer about that. And so there are more limitations and strictures. And that, in a sense, that inhibits our growth as full autonomous human beings.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
What a struggle it must be, for some living under such oppression, or especially women in some countries, not. So that is
Right.
a struggle for sure for some people on this planet. So I'm very appreciative that I'm where I am. So there are, for various reasons, challenging times in everyone's life, and maybe you kind of hit upon this already, and friendships that can certainly friendships can certainly help us get through those difficulties. And when those that may not have the support system of friendship, even families or friendships, struggle in these times of uncertainty, and it does seem like a little bit not knocking you off your even keel here these days. What local organizations could the community at large reach out to for support that you're aware of, or that you're even involved in?
Sure.
Because some people just get a little needing something, to bolster them.
Well, I like to believe that, and this may be naive on my part still, because we're all learning all the time, that most communities have resources. The question is one of access.
Right.
So the resources are there. Now, in this little community, and it's a small community by my standards, having grown up in New York City and now
Right.
being in a small city, if you will. Some people question if it's even a city of 17, 18, 19,000 people. But, we have places like Stone Soup, which is really about community and resilience and moving from food insecurity to food sustainability, and the work that we do not only at our home base but out in the community. There's the Franklin County YMCA. That's
a wonderful resource.
It's a wonderful resource, and
for all ages.
yes, and there
Yeah.
are accommodations made for those who struggle financially to be
Yes.
able to become members and partners in that effort. There's also the work that I'm doing now with a group called Training Active Bystanders, TAB, which is a national model of learning how to effectively intervene when one sees harm being done. And, we know about these things. We may experience them on a regular, daily, multi-times a day process, depending on where we are and who we are. And what we're trying to do is teach people the skills and the confidence to learn how to disarm the harm, if you will. That's an expression I just made up, but it makes sense.
Yes, it does. I'll write that down.
Yeah, so we're
on
encouraging. I'm
film.
a big believer in lifelong learning, and that we all have the potential to learn new skills.
Absolutely.
And to support
At
other
any
people
age.
at
Right.
any age. And I always look forward to taking on new opportunities for my own growth, because I know that also means if I'm learning, then I have the capability of helping to teach or
Yes.
inspire someone else.
Someone else. Right.
So, even in a town that is struggling, as Greenfield is, there are those resources and those people. And the new public library
Library
is going
is
on its
a
third
nice
year now.
Resource.
Excellent
They're always,
resource.
yes, yeah.
And the programming is free
Very
and
helpful.
so on.
Right.
And so those are just a few. I mean, we could spend a whole session just talking about
the
resources
and references. Right. Yeah.
Right. And it's people believing that those are important and that they're opportunities for growth and connection, and that many of them are free or sliding scale or pay what you can, which
Right.
Stone Soup advocates.
Right.
But there are many models of organizations and services and programs that are designed to help pull people out of themselves
Right.
and offer the support to keep them engaged.
Right. Such as once you were on the Human Rights Commission, and that was something that was helpful to the community. Now, were we talking about a week or so ago about the program with the high school students and their program or to help the middle school students kind of work through when they're struggling or having confrontational issues?
Right.
Is there actually going to be some kind of program offered in the summer at the library for young adolescents, especially, I've just recently become aware of a 4-part series on Netflix titled Adolescence, which is a very very forceful showing of an adolescent in deep trouble. Things go sideways in his life very badly, very quickly,
Right.
So when hearing this, that might be very helpful to, preteens going into high school, and at that, 11 to 15, just help them, really with conflicts.
Well,
and
people
friendships
struggle
and-
with this at all points in their lives, and I think the piece you were reflecting on is that the TAB, the Training Active Bystanders Group, is going to be doing some trainings in early June. I believe it is at Greenfield High School. It might be even earlier, mid-May. Dates are not certain at this point, but when we do trainings, we also train teens, and we have a separate training focusing on athletes, in middle school and high school and beyond, in this methodology. And we have found, and the research has been fairly conclusive, that people develop a greater sense of confidence and competence through that kind of a training to help others. So it's teaching empathy and judgment and discernment, but it's also an opportunity for peers to interact with each other in both age and developmentally appropriate ways to create safety.
Right.
And so there's a mentoring element, there's a leadership element, and just like there is at Stone Soup, for people to really reach whatever level they want and to be given the freedom and the safety to test those kinds of things out.
I was just thinking, too, about my childhood. I have a favorite book of mine. It's The Mailman at Bayberry Lane.
Don't know that book. Huh.
And my mother used to read it to me all the time. And basically, they're all the characters in the books are animals. There's the chipmunk is the mailman, and there's a little Miss Pig, and then there's a turtle and a goose. And basically the story is about this mailman who gets the neighbors on Bayberry Lane together to become friends with this new the pig on Mayberry, who has never gets any mail, never has any friends, looks forward to the mailman coming to visit every day, but she never gets anything. And so he determines, well, he's going to get everybody an invitation to go and spend some time with her and show up, and they all bring her a
Lovely.
little gift, tarts or bayberry candles or something. And it's just very early on in my life, it kind of showed me how just one little simple act, can brighten up somebody's, because the moral of the story was, well, then they all became friends, because of this one invitation in life to go and spend time with this person who had no friends, who had no mail coming to her house, who felt very sad and lonely.
Yeah.
Just that one little act of kindness by that mailman character, just
Right,
brought such
right.
joy into her life and brought friends into her life.
Oh,
And
what a beautiful story.
yeah, it's just, that's the kind of thing that I've always, thought of about friendship. It just is, it can be a small thing, a small thing to keep your friendship, kind of alive, or to start a friendship, just a little thing.
It reminds me, since you were talking about literature, one of my favorite works of literature, and also I do believe that children's literature is really best for adults in some ways.
Yes, and I think it's impactful.
Right,
It
so
can
the-
stay with you.
The one that I think of is from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's book, The Little Prince. And there's a quote that has always stayed with me,
See?
so much so that I'm afraid it's become redundant, but it's where between a dialogue between the fox and the little prince, and I think the words are, it is only with the heart that one can speak rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. And that just speaks in so many ways to this power of friendship, because it's nothing that you can necessarily see, but it's something that you can feel when you're in it. You can't really point to what's going on, but you can feel it. And so it's essential, and it's really about living with one's heart and using one's mind to keep that open.
And I was, when you say about that, I was reading the book. I was reading it outside. It was a little bit breezy. I came in. I went back out, and for some reason, the book had gone to page 289. And so I read it. I figured, okay, maybe this is a sign. I don't know. So it said, some might argue that without a certain amount of time together, friends are genuinely not able to develop the depth and quality friendship they may seek. Many of my close friends are in states and countries far away. Of course, this means in-person visits are relatively rare and often fewer, and now further between than with my more local friends. Now more than ever before, there is a multitude of ways to maintain and sustain deep and intimate friendships from a distance. Shortly after reading that passage, on Tuesday morning, my phone rings, and it is Net, my childhood friend. We were born less than a month apart, lived 2 apartments away from each other, grew up together in the same town, been friends for all our lives. And I read that passage, and I told her what I had just read, and we both laughed and laughed, because that's the kind of thing that kind of has happened between us throughout our friendship, throughout our lives. Out of the blue, when maybe she needed to hear from me, or I maybe was thinking about friendship and dwelling on our experiences. It's not always been rosy, not always peaches and cream, but we have had that solid friendship that has gotten us through to this point anyway. And she lives in North Carolina now with her husband. So that really spoke to me. And then she literally spoke to me. She called, and we had this lovely conversation. And so that kind of passage just kind of was profound at that moment, on the Tuesday when I was reading it. And it just, so many things that you've written, I haven't gotten to this page in your book, but that page was just, the wind blew it open, and I was reading it, and I just thought that was really just
that's
kind of
a
interesting,
wonderful experience.
How friends can be that way. I mean, there are some friendships on a certain level where you can almost, what they're almost, you can finish their sentences, you have such a close connection, and that's that type of person. I feel extremely fortunate that she has been a part of my life. And
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a rubber band moment for both of you.
It
The rubber
was.
band is still holding.
It was.
Yeah.
I was thinking, my kind of concluding thoughts here for this interview was I was going to reference scene, the ending scene from "It's a Wonderful Life," Jimmy Stewart. Yeah, and the ending scene where all citizens of Bedford Falls, they show up at George Bailey's house to give him the money, which he can't find in order to keep him from being arrested. But as we, the audience who have watched the movie, know, it was actually stolen by the evil, greedy Mr. Potter. But throughout George's life, he treated everyone with genuine compassion, respect, loyalty, and love. And in return, everyone treated George with the same compassion, respect, loyalty, and love by that ending scene where it depicts the people placing those bills and coins into a basket in front of George. And it shows to me, it showed to me that the audience isn't really about the money that had the value to the story. It was the friends, the actual physical friends in front of him, all the town, and all those people could be considered his friends, and they showed up for him in a time when he, was in his deepest despair, and they were there for him, just like he had been there for them. And I think that's, what I think when we talk about friends and friendships, just being there. If they call you and say, you want to meet, do you have a minute to talk? I have friends like that. They'll call and say, you got a few minutes, and you say, yeah, okay, give me a call. You text back, sure, call, I'm free. And that's the kind of value, I think, in our lives that is the most meaningful, the people. I mean, clearly, he was in trouble, with the financially, but the value was the people that were standing in front of him, toasting him and singing, may all acquaintance be forgot. Auld Lang Syne,
Yeah.
So,
Well,
what are your thoughts about some kind of thing like that happening?
Well, I think people
To show up, to be present,
Communication is a two-way loop, right? So, on the one hand, there's expression and being expressive, and on the other hand, there's being receptive, and so it's give and take and give and take, and over time that becomes shared. And you talked about people finishing each other's sentences, and this happens over time because people want to be friends with other people and make their own choices, and to be sought out and to seek out others. And that's what makes friendship so unique. It's a choice who we are friends with. It's not a matter of just circumstance. Like when you are in a job, you work with whoever's there.
Co-workers, right.
Right. And
You're a
you make
team,
the best of it.
right.
Same with your family
Regardless,
and so on. Not to
right.
say that they can't become friends.
Right.
But there is something about being sought out or seeking out that really is a difference maker in our lives. And we all know that we can get a great charge out of a great conversation or an activity shared together or
It's
whatever.
a simple moment, yep.
And so to me, it's the ultimate in terms of relationships that are sustainable. And we can learn so much. And so that, to me, those are, I don't know if I have a concluding point, but friendship is evolving. And as it evolves, we evolve. And so it's a kind of a never-ending loop that I think just brings strength and grace and power into our lives.
Our lives. Yeah. Well, that's a great ending comment,
Oh,
as far as I'm concerned. Well, I feel blessed by the friendships in my life, and I will always consider them to be my silver linings. Thank you very much. Have a great day.